Welcome back, everyone, to Classic Books Deep Dive.
Okay.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Joanna.
And we are diving into a book today that has had a really profound impact on how we understand the art of persuasion, influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini.
This book really is a classic, Michael. It explores the psychological principles behind why people say yes, and it delves into the tactics that are used by compliance professionals.
Oh, interesting.
Like salespeople and advertisers. Cialdini spent years researching this, and his insights are backed by solid research.
This is not just like armchair psychology. This is a serious look at the psychology of persuasion. We highly recommend grabbing a copy. We've included a link in the show notes.
Go ahead and grab a physical copy if you can. It's worth it.
So Cialdini breaks down persuasion into 6 key principles. We're going to go through all of them today, and we'll start with the first one, reciprocation. So think about how you feel obligated to return favors, gifts, or even those unsolicited gestures.
Right, like you feel like you kind of have to. You owe them one. That's reciprocation in action, and it's a really powerful force.
It's almost like an unspoken social contract. It's like you feel indebted.
It is.
Even if the favor was unwanted.
And that can actually lead us to make decisions that we might not otherwise make simply to even the scales.
Okay, interesting. So give me an example. How does this actually work?
Sure. So Cialdini, he highlights this study where a researcher named Joe offered some participants a soda, and then later he asked them to buy raffle tickets.
Okay.
The people who got that soda, they bought twice as many tickets as those who didn't.
So that's really interesting because it's like such a small gesture, a can of soda.
It doesn't have to be big at all.
And it creates that sense of obligation. So it makes you think about all those things like the free samples at the grocery store, or like the free gift included with a donation request.
And Cialdini points out that it doesn't even matter if we like the person offering the favor.
Oh, really? So you could dislike somebody and still feel obligated.
So, for example, the Hare Krishna Society used to give out flowers or small gifts before asking for donations. And it was surprisingly effective.
Even though lots of people didn't agree with their belief system or what they were doing? That's wild. It's fascinating how these subtle tactics can influence our behavior without us even realizing it.
Because we don't think about it consciously most of the time.
And it even plays out in larger contexts, like in politics.
Oh, for sure.
Where the exchange of favors, we call it log rolling, that's commonplace.
Totally.
That's how things get done.
So moving on to the second principle.
Okay.
Commitment and consistency.
Okay.
So this explores how once we commit to a position, we are more likely to agree to requests that are consistent with that commitment.
So basically you're saying it's about sticking to your word and following through on your commitments even if things change.
But here's the interesting thing. Even small, seemingly insignificant commitments can have a big impact on our future actions.
Okay, like what?
Think about signing a petition. That small act can actually make you more receptive to future requests that are related to that cause.
Oh, interesting.
Cialdini uses the example of toy companies that advertise really heavily before Christmas, creating a demand for a very specific toy, and then they undersupply the stores, forcing parents to buy a substitute.
Oh, so you've already told your kid you're going to get them that toy, and then it's not available.
And then after Christmas, when they start running those ads again, the parents often feel obligated to fulfill their initial promise.
Oh.
So it ends up basically doubling their profits.
So it's a really clever marketing tactic, but is it ethical?
It's a good question. It definitely raises ethical questions.
Because it seems like they're exploiting our desire to be consistent.
Yeah, and it really highlights the importance of being aware of how this principle can be used to influence our decisions.
Yeah.
And public commitments are even more potent.
Because everyone knows you're doing it.
Because it adds a layer of social pressure.
So you feel like you have to do it.
Announcing a goal publicly can actually really help us stick to it because we don't want to appear inconsistent in front of others.
Especially if you put it out there on social media.
For sure.
And then everyone's going to be like, hey, what happened to that goal? So this brings us to another tactic that's associated with this principle. It's called the lowball technique. So can you explain how that works?
So that's where someone offers a great deal. And then after you've committed, they remove the advantage.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
It's really frustrating, but we see this all the time. Think about car dealerships. They lower the price, and then they add all these extra fees. Frustrating, but it works.
Because you already feel like you've committed, and you don't want to back out. And they know that.
They do.
That's good to know. That's good to know. So recognizing these tactics is crucial for making informed decisions that align with our true values and goals.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the next principle.
Okay.
This one is social proof.
Oh, this one's a big one.
This is a big one.
So this one suggests that we often look to others to determine what is correct.
Especially when we're unsure
Yes, especially when we're uncertain or we're in unfamiliar situations.
Like if you're traveling in a foreign country and you don't know the customs, you're going to look to other people to see what they're doing.
You just follow what everyone else is doing.
Right.
Like choosing a restaurant along line often signals that the food must be good.
Or like if a product has lots of good reviews online, we're more likely to buy it.
For sure, and we see this in marketing all the time, especially with testimonials from average people. If it worked for them,
Then it'll work for me. It makes it seem more relatable and trustworthy. Now, Cialdini also points to a darker example, which is the bystander effect. So have you ever heard of the murder of Kitty Genovese?
Yes, I have.
So this was a really tragic case where 38 people witnessed her attack,
Oh my gosh.
but no one intervened.
Wow.
And this tragically illustrates this principle because the presence of so many bystanders created this diffusion of responsibility.
They all thought someone else would take care of it.
Everyone assumed that someone else would call the police, and so no one did. It's a haunting reminder of how social proof can lead to inaction, even in a crisis.
It really is.
It's really disturbing.
It is.
So what can we do to counteract this, like if we ever find ourselves in a situation like that?
Well, if you need help, be direct.
Okay.
Single out someone
Okay.
specifically and ask for their help.
Okay, so don't just yell help. You say, hey, you in the blue shirt, call 911. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's really good advice.
That could actually save a life.
That could save a life.
And it's not just emergencies where we see this principle at play.
Well, where else do we see it?
Think about nightclubs.
Okay.
They create those long lines outside to create this illusion of popularity and exclusivity.
Right, to make it seem like everyone wants to be there.
And then you're like, oh, I got to get in there. And then there's even more tragic examples.
Like what?
Like the mass suicide at Jonestown,
Oh,
where the followers of Jim Jones, they drank poisoned Kool-Aid.
that was a really awful tragedy.
It was.
And it was a result of social proof.
Cialdini suggests that the unfamiliar environment combined with Jones's charismatic authority really intensified their reliance on the group.
So they're in a foreign country.
Yeah.
They don't really know what to do. They're looking to each other, and they're looking to this authority figure. That's a really, really tragic example.
It really is.
And it shows how important it is to not just blindly follow the crowd.
Absolutely.
Like, we need to evaluate situations independently and make our own judgments.
You have to think for yourself.
Yes.
All right, so moving on to the fourth principle,
All right. What's the fourth one?
liking.
Liking. So that makes sense.
This one's pretty straightforward. Put simply, we are more likely to say yes to people we know and like.
That makes sense. We want to help our friends. We want to do favors for people we like.
And Cialdini outlines 5 factors that influence liking.
Okay, let's hear it.
So there's physical attractiveness,
Okay.
similarity,
Okay.
compliments,
All right.
contact and cooperation,
Okay.
and association.
Wow. Okay, 5 big ones.
5 big ones.
Okay, so let's start with physical attractiveness. So Cialdini talks about this thing called the halo effect, where we often assume that attractive people possess other positive qualities.
Yes.
Like we just assume if someone is attractive, they're also smart, they're also kind, they're also trustworthy.
Research backs this up. Attractive people are often perceived as more trustworthy, intelligent, competent.
Oh.
They are more likely to get help when they need it, and they're even more persuasive in changing people's opinions.
That's wild.
It is.
It's amazing how much our perception of attractiveness can subconsciously influence our judgments and decisions.
It really is.
So it's not just about like romantic attraction, it's about every area of life.
It affects everything. So moving on to similarity.
Okay, how does similarity factor into liking?
Well, we tend to like people who are like us.
So like if they have similar interests.
Interests, backgrounds, values, age, religion, opinions.
So even small things.
Even small things like smoking habits can create this sense of connection and shared values. So salespeople, for example, are often trained to mirror their customers' body language.
Oh, wow.
And verbal style.
Oh, that's interesting.
Subtly build rapport.
So they're trying to create this sense of like, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Your buddies.
We're buddies. That's really smart.
It is.
Okay, so what about compliments?
Compliments. We all love compliments.
Everyone likes compliments.
Everyone likes compliments.
So how do compliments work in terms of persuasion?
Well, Cialdini's research shows that compliments, even insincere flattery,
Wow. Even if it's not genuine.
even if it's not genuine, it can increase liking and compliance.
It still works.
It still works.
Wow.
Because we're more likely to do something for someone if they made us feel good about ourselves.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Okay, so let's talk about those deeper connections
Okay.
that are built through shared experiences. That's where contact and cooperation come in.
So like if you've been through something together,
positive interactions foster liking. Cialdini discusses a study on school desegregation,
Okay.
where students from different racial backgrounds were forced to work together towards a common goal. And the result was that prejudice and hostility decreased.
So the fact that they had to work together, even though they came from different backgrounds, actually brought them closer together. That's really powerful.
It is.
It shows the power of shared experiences to build relationships.
Totally.
So the final one was association.
Yes, association.
Now, how does that work?
We tend to like things that are connected to things we already like.
So give me an example.
Okay, think of celebrity endorsements or politicians aligning themselves with popular causes. So they're trying to transfer those positive feelings from one thing to another. Advertisers use this principle all the time.
Like athletes endorsing athletic wear.
Yep.
Pop stars promoting soft drinks. It's all about associating the product with a desirable image or person.
And Cialdini even mentions how weathermen have been blamed for bad weather.
Wow.
Simply because they're associated with it.
Right, they're the messenger. That's wild.
It is.
It's fascinating how our brains make these connections without us even realizing it. It really underscores the importance of being aware of the factors that influence liking, especially in situations where someone is trying to persuade us.
Absolutely. Recognizing these influences can help us avoid making biased decisions.
Based on our feelings for the person making the request. So to sum up, we've covered reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, and liking.
4 down.
4 down.
2 to go.
And we'll continue our deep dive into the remaining 2 principles, authority and scarcity, in the next episode.
Stay tuned. Ready to jump back into Cialdini's persuasive world?
Let's do it.
We left off with liking. Now let's talk about the power of authority.
Oh, this one always resonates with me because it's like we're conditioned from childhood to respect and obey authority figures.
It's deeply ingrained in us, and for good reason. It helps maintain social order, and it keeps us safe in many situations.
Right, like you don't want to question the firefighter when they tell you to evacuate. You just do it.
You do it.
But as Cialdini points out, this can also make us vulnerable to manipulation.
Unfortunately, yes.
So how does that work?
Well, I mean, think about the Milgram experiments.
Oh, those were intense.
They were groundbreaking.
So for those who haven't heard of them, basically participants were told to administer electric shocks to another person.
And the shocks got progressively stronger.
And it's chilling to think that so many people were willing to inflict pain simply because a scientist in a lab coat told them to.
It's really disturbing.
It is disturbing.
And those experiments really demonstrated the immense power of authority.
To override our own moral compass.
And it's not just direct orders that influence us.
Oh, really?
Cialdini argues that even the symbols of authority can sway our judgments and actions.
So, what kinds of symbols are we talking about?
Titles, uniforms, expensive clothing.
So, the trappings of authority.
Those trappings can create an aura of expertise and credibility.
Even if the person doesn't actually possess those qualities. That makes me think of that study where a guy jaywalked across a busy street.
I've heard of that one.
When he was wearing a business suit, 3 times as many people followed him compared to when he was dressed casually.
It's amazing how easily we can be influenced by those visual cues.
So it's not like the suit itself made him any more knowledgeable about traffic safety, but it created this illusion of authority. And con artists often exploit this vulnerability.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Cialdini mentions the bank examiner scam, where people posing as officials use fake uniforms to gain compliance and steal money.
It's a classic con.
It is a classic con, and it's so effective because people trust those in positions of authority.
It's a really good reminder that we need to be critical of authority and not just blindly follow orders, especially when those orders conflict with our own judgment or make us feel uncomfortable. Always question whether the authority figure is truly credible and trustworthy.
That's such an important takeaway.
It is.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of just blindly obeying.
Especially when we're under pressure or stressed. Okay, so moving on to Cialdini's final principle.
All right, let's hear it.
Scarcity.
Scarcity.
This principle explores how we value things that are less available.
Like limited time offers, going out of business sales.
Yep.
Or those while supplies last warnings.
All of those.
They always get me.
They create a sense of urgency.
You feel like you have to act now or you're going to miss out.
Precisely. And Cialdini explains that this principle works for 2 main reasons.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, we tend to assume that scarce things are of better quality.
Okay, that makes sense, like a limited edition collector's item or a rare vintage wine. Scarcity often implies value. Okay, and what's the second reason?
The second reason is that the idea of losing something triggers this psychological phenomenon called reactance.
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 Okay, I've never heard of that before. What is that?
Basically, we react by wanting what we can't have, even if we didn't particularly desire it before.
So it's like reverse psychology.
Kind of.
Interesting.
That reminds me of the story about the cookie jar experiment.
Oh, tell me about that one.
So participants rated cookies from a jar with fewer cookies as more desirable and tastier.
Even though they were the same cookies as the jar with more cookie. Wow, so just the perception of scarcity made them seem better.
It's really powerful.
That's wild.
And this principle isn't limited to material goods.
Oh, really?
Cialdini discusses how censorship can actually increase the appeal of the censored information.
Oh, that's so true. It's like that saying, banned in Boston. The restriction itself piques our curiosity.
For sure, the very act of limiting access makes something seem more desirable.
I've definitely experienced that.
And then there's the Romeo and Juliet effect,
What's that?
where parental interference can actually intensify young love.
Oh, so it's like the forbidden fruit. That
Oh.
makes a lot of sense.
So all of these examples really highlight how scarcity can be a powerful motivator.
It's like that fear of missing out. So how do we resist the allure of scarcity and make more rational decisions?
Well, Cialdini suggests that recognizing the emotional arousal that scarcity triggers is crucial.
Okay, so that feeling of panic or urgency, that's a sign to step back and reassess the situation.
Take a breath.
Take a breath.
And ask yourself, do I want this item because I genuinely need or value it?
Or am I just caught up in the hype? Okay, so we need to separate our desire for the item from our desire to possess something exclusive or rare. I think that's really key.
It requires a conscious effort to step back from that emotional pull.
And make a rational decision based on our actual needs, not our impulses.
You got it.
Okay, that's good advice. That's
Oh.
good advice.
So there you have it. We've explored all 6 principles of persuasion outlined in Influence.
Wow, that was a whirlwind tour of the human psyche.
It was quite a journey.
It was a journey.
But Cialdini's work is so insightful.
Like a map of the human mind,
It is.
revealing those subtle ways we can be influenced often without even realizing it.
And while these principles can be used unethically to manipulate, understanding them empowers us to recognize those tactics and make more informed decisions.
You can choose how we respond rather than simply reacting. So Cialdini's book isn't just about understanding persuasion, it's about understanding ourselves.
Very well said.
So let's move on to our final thoughts on Cialdini's influence. What are your takeaways? It's really about the sheer pervasiveness of these principles. Like they're everywhere. They're woven into the fabric of our daily interactions.
They really are. Once you see them, you can't unsee them.
It's both fascinating and a bit unsettling.
I agree. It really makes you realize how susceptible we all are to these subtle influences, even when we think we're being perfectly rational.
But awareness is key, wouldn't you say? Now that we understand these principles, we can be more conscious of how they're shaping our decisions and the decisions of those around us.
Absolutely. We can be more deliberate in our choices, more discerning in our evaluations, and more resistant to manipulation.
We can even use these principles ethically
Right.
to become more effective communicators and influencers ourselves.
I love that idea.
So imagine applying the principle of reciprocation to build stronger relationships, or leveraging social proof to encourage positive social change.
That's a great point.
The possibilities are really intriguing.
It's like Cialdini gave us this set of keys to unlock the hidden doors of human behavior.
He really did.
And with those keys comes a responsibility to use them wisely and ethically.
Absolutely. So now we'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Cialdini's 6 principles of persuasion?
Have you noticed them at play in your own life?
Share your experiences, insights, and questions in the comments below.
We can't wait to continue the conversation with you.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini.
Until next time, happy reading.